Hello. Today I'm going to show you how you can make shop trusses, wooden 2x4 shop trusses for your workshop or garage or whatever project you want to do for $37.16 a piece, minus connectors, which we'll get to that. But so, and what I'm talking about building is roughly 24-foot long trusses. And I'm going to put them 3 foot apart. So that would be, I'm going to build a 24 by 24 building with 24 foot long trusses 3 foot apart. Now, before we get into how to make them, first it would be selecting the criteria. Obviously, you might have size constraints. You're trying to fit a certain dimension building in a certain space, or whatever. In my case, my criteria is I want to be able to walk on the roof easily. And the way that roof pitches are measured is in how much it raises up for every foot it goes in. So what I'm going to go with is a 312, where for every foot it goes in, it'll go up 3 inches. That, in my opinion, is the easiest to walk on. It's also what most metal roof manufacturers is kind of a minimum pitch that they require. 412 is pretty easy to walk on, but anything more than that, it starts to get a little more difficult, especially if it's a slippery metal roof or if it's wet. So a 312 is always just comfortable, so that's why I chose that. My second thing is 12-foot metal pans are readily available in all different widths and colors, styles. Okay, so I just want to show you all, you don't need anything special to build these trusses, and you literally don't. You don't need jigs, you don't need anything special at all. You can do it right on the ground, you can do it right on the dirt. You really need some kind of saw, like a skill saw, a circular saw, or you could use a chop saw, a tape measure, a drill, some screws. These are the screws I'm using because I'm going to be using plywood pieces, scraps, to connect my joints on the trusses instead of gang plates is what manufacturers typically use. I don't like them. I don't like banging on them. They tend to cut your hands. I don't think they're as strong, and I have plywood, so that's what I'm going to use. And these are the screws. This is about $32. You could get 10 trusses out of this. They're number 8 by 1 5/8 with the nice T25 bit comes with it. These are perfect because they'll pass through if you use 1/2 inch plywood, but they're not going to pass through the other side of the truss and cut your hands and all that kind of nonsense. Real quick, I guess we could do the numbers afterward, but I'll just give you an idea how I came up with you could build these for actually less than $40 a piece. These boards, so I'm building 24-foot trusses. These boards are 12 foot. They're 2x4 by 12. It's a mixture. If you go to your local box store, it's either going to be spruce, whitewood, or pine, or fir. Sometimes comes out of Canada. But anyway, they're $6.53 a piece. So there's 5 of these in my trusses. There's going to be 2 on the bottom, 2 for the rake, and then a 5th one for the webbing. And then you end up with you need about 3 more feet. So that adds on 3 boards for the whole job. So, okay, so you have $32 in the 5 main boards for the truss. You have $1.96 for the additional 3 that's required to do the total of 10. This is to do 10 trusses, which, like I said, I've done this and put them 3 foot apart, and that's plenty on a, I guess if you had a heavy snow load, you would need to consider that, and that might change things. You might want to put them closer together. I don't. Where I am, there's no snow, and this is just for a garage. All it's holding up is a metal roof and a little bit of pine straw I'm going to need to blow off. So 3 feet apart is more than adequate. So if you did 3 feet apart and you made 10 trusses, that cost you about $40 each, right? You could build a 30-foot building. So the only thing that is not included in this price is the plywood, but still that comes to $37.16. That includes the screws. There's $1.96 worth of screws in each truss. It's $32 for the box of screws. If you do 10 trusses, that's $1.96 in screws for each truss. The $32 for the 5 main boards, and the 3 extra that are required for the whole job, which puts it at $37.16 a piece. So still, if you want to come in under the $40, right, that still leaves you about $3 per truss. Like I said, I'm using plywood, but whatever you have, right? Maybe you have some OSB board, or maybe sheet metal. You know, just depends what you have left over from some project, or you could just buy the little gang plates. But anyway, so you can easily do this for $40 a piece. Is my point. The reason that I think I already said this, so I'm going with 12-foot metal because it's readily available, like I said. So what I want to make sure I do is, I'm just going to mock this up for y'all. So this is kind of what determined my whole truss, right? This is the rake. If I'm using 12-foot metal, anytime you do a metal roof, you want the metal to cover all the wood. The roof will be the biggest part of the building. It's an overhang. So if I cut these to 12 feet, well, not only would these end up being too short, but also the metal wouldn't cover it, and the ends of the wood would rot. So what you want to do, if you're going to do what I'm doing, if you're going, or anything, if you were doing 8 foot, then you'd want to subtract about 2 to 3 inches off of your rake, so that the metal hangs beyond the end of that, so that the wood doesn't rot. Okay? Now this board here is temporary for the mock-up. What that does is keeps these two straight. I bump these two together, and then I push this up to it to keep those straight, and I'm going to screw these on. Alright? Here's something you can do that they probably don't do at most truss manufacturing plants, is also crown all your lumber up. What that means is when you look down the length of the board, like this, okay, the board goes like that. So this is your crown side. So you want to put that up. By putting that up, gravity, right, is going to make it want to sag. Well, instead of starting out with it already sagging, it's up. So when it sags a little, it'll be straight. So I always mark an arrow up to mark the crown. I've already done that on those two. So I'm always putting the crown up on all my lumber. Bothers you. I kind of like seeing little things like that down the road because it just reminds you of building it. It's just kind of cool to me. But if you don't like that, just use a pencil. But I'm just going to kind of mock this up and kind of show y'all so you get it. First thing I would do is go ahead and screw these together. What this is going to do to hold the string. Because otherwise the bottom of this truss wouldn't be straight, right? It could be, and then it would throw off all your angles. And you only have to do this one time. Keep this in mind. You only got to mock all this stuff up this one time, and then you'll have a pattern to make all your cuts for all 10. You don't have to do this. You do this once, you'll mark all your pieces once you figure out all your angles and everything, and then use that as a pattern, and then cut all your pieces. So it's really pretty simple. So that's, now I got a nice straight bottom, got the crowns up. the next thing I'm going to do is, I believe I went over pitch, and I was going to go with a 3. If you, like a 312, if you were in a heavy snow load, you might want to do a steeper pitch, maybe to shed snow and for spring. And like I said, I don't have a snow load. I want to be able to walk on it. That's my main criteria. So I'm going with a 312. So that's what I was trying to explain. If you don't understand pitch, it just means that for every foot that this goes up, it will go up 1 inch, or however many inches per foot in that direction that you choose. So if it was a 112, it would go up 1 inch for every 12. 212, 2 inches for every 12, and so on and so forth. So mine, as I go that way, it'll go up 3 inches per 12. And I literally just finished doing a metal roof on it. It was like a little bit over a 412, and it was easy. It initially had asphalt shingles, and it was easy to walk on when it had asphalt shingles, but and it was actually easy to walk on. We switched it to a metal roof, and it was still easy to walk on. But when it was wet, forget it. So now you want to measure off of here, not the bottom of the back, right? And this is where I need to come up 3 feet. Now, I'm going to be cutting my rake to length first, which, remember, I was going to go 3 inches short of 12 feet. 12 feet is 144 inches. I'm going to cut them at 141. That'll be the long point. I'm going to do that first because that's my criteria, right? I have unlimited space, basically. My concern is making it work with building materials. If your concern was fitting it in a certain space, say next to your house or whatever, inside of a fence, or for whatever the reason it has to fit an exact footprint, well then just cut this first to whatever that number is that you want, and then you would just make this work to that, if that makes sense. Then you would just flush this up to this end, find your angle, which I'll show you how to do, and that would determine the length of your rake. But either way, you'll have basically the same result. Just depends what your criteria is. What's the most important? I'm going to cut both of those real quick. Now, where this ends, on where the rake intersects this bottom band, is really not that important, because that's going to get cut off, right? Because once again, the rake is what's determining my overall length. Now I just gotta get back to touching, get the ends touching. Get this at 3 foot, and also try to get it. So I'm gonna take this is just a straight edge, and this is a piece off of a metal pool. You could use anything, 4 foot level, 3 foot level, whatever. Okay, so this is what you want as you're mocking it up, right? This is a little close up. So I've cut this to length, the rake. It's just touching here. This is straight I've used this straightener, right? Because that's crucial, because if that's not straight, then it would throw off your angle here and everything. Okay, so those are cut to length, and like I said, it doesn't matter. These have not been cut to length yet. It's going to be cut off at the end. I'll show you. But that doesn't. What matters is it's long enough, right? The rake is sitting on top of it, and then here's your center, of the two, pull that over to your center. It's kind of hard to hold the camera, but you get it. And then you could use, obviously a framing square would be even better. The bigger the square, the more accurate, but I promise you this is close enough for what we're doing. So that gives you your, shows you that that's at center. And then take your tape measure like this and pull, make sure you're pulling off of the right. Got to pull off of the band and not the very bottom, right? That would be a mistake because that's just your straight edge there. Just pull off of there. See, I've got my exactly 3 feet to the top. So that's my 312. If you wanted a 412, you would just do exactly what I'm doing, but pull it out to 4 feet, which would obviously also make the truss shorter, right? Because you, as you go up, it would get shorter, the overall length of the truss. So you got that at 3 feet. Okay, so now once you've done all that, you can go down here and mark your angle. And that's what I would do, is mark this angle first here, and I'll show you how to do that, and do that exact same thing on the other end, and then get your center angle. But you have to mock it up the way I have, because if everything's not sitting where it's going to sit, then how would you mark the angles? It would throw everything off. So this will be, since I pre-measured these and I've already subtracted my 3 inches from my 12-foot roof material, this will be your long point of your angle. So I'm just going to use a straight edge, line it up with this long point here, get it parallel with the bottom band, just like that. See how the margin is even? And then mark your angle. There you go. That's your angle. This comes out. That's your angle for your rake. It's that simple. And you go down and do the exact same thing on the other end. So let me go ahead and cut that and I'll show you. Okay, I made the cut like I showed you on the rake on both ends. That's that end. And then this end. And like I said, it doesn't really matter where it's sitting as far as here, as long as it's on the board. What does matter is, you know, getting the center of the rake to be in the center of the truss. And the reason it doesn't matter, but the reason it does matter is because when you put the piece of plywood, if you had the rake slid one way or the other, then the center vertical board that's going to end up right where this is, that piece of plywood wouldn't connect it all together, right? So that's kind of why it matters. You want that plywood to connect all the pieces. Where if the joint was way up to the side, you'd have to make the piece of plywood huge or whatever. That's really the only reason it matters. So here's an easy way to find this top angle. These are still square. These are still square cuts up here. All I've done is exactly what I showed you. You haven't missed anything. So a quick, easy way to do that is to just put, it's hard to hold everything, but get that square off of well, these are screwed together, so it doesn't matter there. So this is now coming up at 90 degrees. I want to get it to right to where, pull this over to where this straight edge is 90 degrees off of the bottom, and also right on the edge of what will be my long point. Because once again, remember, I've already cut these. I subtracted 3 inches from 12 feet because that's exactly what I want these to be. So this will be the long point. The angle is going to come down like that. So you just want to slide this. It's a lot easier to do with two hands, but slide this straight edge to where it's lined up. And slide it to where it's lined up there, and also square or 90 degrees off of the bottom. But also you should have to double check the 3 feet like I showed you, measuring from here to here, which I've already done, and also you want to make sure your angle is closed down there, right? So make sure you've got that pushed up closed down at that end. Make sure your 3 feet's good here. Line up this, make it 90 degrees here. Okay, so now I've got 90 degrees. I'm lined up on that edge. Now I can take my, there's 2 ways you could do this. If you're using a skill saw or a circular saw, a handheld circular saw, you can just draw a line right there. There's your angle. If you're maybe going to be using a chop saw and you'd rather set the degrees, you could take your square right now, slide it up till it bumps this straight edge, and look at your degrees over here. And for me, it's coming to about 13 and a half, 14 degrees is what this angle is. So, or like I said, probably the more simple way, if you're just going to be using hand tools, like you could literally build these with, like I said, a drill and a battery saw. But here you go, boom, and that's your cut. As long as, like I said, it has to be at that long point, because these are already cut to length. If you didn't want to cut them to length first, you could obviously find this angle first. You could run the end of the rake underneath this, underneath the bottom, if you needed to. But if you're just kind of, if you know what the length of your rake is going to be, this is the perfect way. Okay, so now I've gone ahead and made that cut I just showed you with the 13 and a half degrees. Next, what you're going to want to do is take you a 3-foot piece. Remember, I said at the beginning of the video, there's if you look at this, right, if you're going to build these, we'll have to measure exactly what they come out at. It's around, they're about 23 feet, give or take. We'll get an exact measurement at the end. But anyway, this is made up of, right, you got 1, and then 2, 3, 4. That's 4 12-foot 2x4s. And then there's going to be some center webbing that goes like this, and then from the center and then back this way. Those are each 6 feet, so that's your 5th 2x4x12, and then you end up with a 3-foot piece. And that's why obviously you can get 4 3-foot 2x4s out of a 12-footer. Well, if you're doing 10 trusses, you need 10, so you'd only get 8 out of 2 of them, so that's why you need 3 additional 12-footers. I guess technically you could get an 8-footer if you're trying to be super cheap, but so anyway, so my point is, at this point in time, you could take once you figure all this out, it'll be more systematic and factory-like, and you'll just be using this as a pattern and then tracing your pieces and just duplicating them the additional 9 times. So you could take the 3 of the 2x4x12s and cut them into 3-foot pieces, because you're going to need it here in the center. I guess let me put you on a tripod and I'll show you how to put that 3-foot piece, how to mark it exactly with the angles. So to mark this, it's pretty simple. Make sure the end that's going down is a good square cut, because that's your finished cut. Just center it up on your joint, like I said before, because you're gonna have a big piece of plywood joining all these together. You can check for square. Get this square. Make sure your ends, make sure everything is where it's supposed to be before you ever mark each. Because remember, this is the pattern, so you got to get this pattern good, and then you'll be able to be more speedy and just make quick cuts. So I've got the joint nice and tight. You get it 90 degrees here, off of the bottom, centered up on the top, all the joints tight, and then you can just take your Sharpie or your pencil or whatever and just mark it just like that. So let me get that cut, and I will show you that one and the next steps. Okay, after you cut that center piece in, I showed you how to mark it, and you cut it and you insert that. Take one of your 2x4x12s and cut it in half, so you'll have two 6-foot pieces. And next, what I do, this is going to be a web, and it might help you to block the truss up, like with some scrap 2x4s or some of the little cut ends, slide them up under there to lift it. Or you may have, if your ground is way out of level, I know it doesn't look like it, but this spot's actually pretty level. It's on a slope, but it's level, or it's flat. But if your ground is severely out of level, you can obviously like block up the low end, because you want it to be flat. It can be sloped, but it needs to be flat. But so what I want to do for this part is, okay, so I made these 6 foot so that they would be as long as possible. It's going to be a web going in here like this, on an angle like this. So what I do is I mark the center of this rake. So 141, I should have known that. I said it like 10 times. That's 70 and a half inches. So I'm going to mark 70 and a half on here. I'm going to go ahead and mark both of them. So you don't necessarily have to do it this way. In my mind, though, it makes it stronger, right? To hit the center. So what I would recommend is whatever your rake length is, just split it in half. And then the reason these are 6 feet is because that's as long as we can make them, right? Because we have 12-foot material. So they were always the crown up. So so this is your crown side. So I just like to mark it. If you're in a huge hurry, you could skip this, but it's smart. Okay. So now I got the crown on. I'm going to slide it under here into this corner. Put this back. I'm trying to hit this longest point. So all you're really doing at this step is you're maximizing your material, right? You just make sure all your joints are together, and then you get the bottom of this to be sitting on the top of this, right there, and then I'll go and bring y'all in again. Okay. So this was my 6 foot mark, which I guess technically really isn't, it's really not necessary. Because all you're really doing is when your joints are together down there, and then, you want your center to be in the proper position and 90 degrees to the bottom band, and every joint is, correct, and it's sitting here right, then you line up that lower corner there, and then down here it's just put it to where, see, if I go further in, it's too short. You see how now it's sticking out there? So just flush that up. Okay, that's flush. It's that simple. And now take your Sharpie or your pencil once again. I know the lid is on it, but just mark it here, mark it along this edge. Come over here, mark it along this edge. And then you're just going to do the exact same thing on this side with your other 6 foot piece. Slide it underneath and mark it exactly the same. Okay, let me go ahead and cut those. Alright, I put those in. Now it's really starting to look like something. Looks like a truss, right? Except just take off the bottom. Well, obviously add the gang plates. But this is a step that I do that's probably, or definitely not necessary. This is pretty much a standard truss design. But I just like to add it because it's just a little extra work. Is I add a support here, just that connects the bottom band to the top rake. And if you put it, you know, here, you can connect it all with this same piece of plywood. So it's the exact same thing. Just put it in here, put it like centered up roughly on the center of that. Square it with your speed square, framing square where it's 90 degrees off the bottom, and then draw your line here, you know, to get your angle, and do that on both sides. So kind of get it where I just add that piece. It's not necessary. You don't have to, but I just like it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll do both of those, and then next will just be cut the plywood pieces and screw it together. That's pretty much all there is to it. And like I said, then you would have your pattern. You could mark your mark all your pieces where they go, and go cut 10 of each, or I guess it would be 9 if you're doing, you know, if you're doing 10, you'd cut 9 more of each piece. But I'll go ahead and cut those, get those in. So there's the piece just laying there that I add. That I told you is not necessarily necessary. And then the other one down there, same thing. It's just laying there. And then I have a piece of plywood laying here, and it's basically the same method of, if this was up on a table where you could lay the plywood on the top of it, right, and trace it. But since it's on the ground, that's not really an option. It's easier to slide it under. But these, you know, with the exception of the end plywood where you join this, and then the top here, right, so the two ends and the top, those are the only parts that need angles. The rest of this can just be little squares, right? So you could just put a square, just like they use little squares, little gang plates, and they hammer them in. Like I said, I don't like those. Before I cut, I like to join this bottom up, and probably in the top, before I cut the bottom to length down there. Obviously you want to cut that before you put the plywood, or it kind of gets in the way. You can do it with it there, but it's harder. So like I said, I would join this and that, and before I cut that, and then obviously I would take this off. But I'll go ahead and put you on a tripod and at least show you how I mark the one plywood. But it's the same thing. I'm just going to slide it under a marker. I'll show you all at least one or two of them, and then I'll probably just cut them and kind of show you putting the whole thing together. But this is roughly what it's going to look like with the little pieces in there. And like I said, those aren't necessarily necessary. So let me get you on a tripod again. Okay, so I'm just gonna mark the like, this is really not the crucial. It just depends how picky you are, but all you're doing is joining these surfaces together. But what I like to do, just roughly mark so that it hangs over an equal distance from either side of the center. Whatever piece you're using, just center it up. So 14 inches is about the center. I'm just going to slide this under, which is probably going to be more difficult than you would think. Like I said, this is, and once you have the pattern, you have the pattern, and this is, there's only two with angles, so slide this under. Gotta take everything apart here. There's my center mark. If I want to get the most out of this piece, so I'm just putting the center of the plywood at the center of the ridge there. Gotta keep closing everything up. It wants to just kind of fall apart till you get it finalized. So then just mark this kind of in the same fashion we've been doing the whole. So you could, obviously you have to have that angle, but anything, so that is, you know, non-negotiable. You got to have that so it's not sticking up, because this is your roof. But you could do anything you wanted after that point. I mean, you could cut this back like on an angle here. You could leave it huge like that. You got to consider weight. These can get pretty heavy. And that's what I was going to say is, I don't think I've mentioned, I recommend using like a kiln dried lumber, because if you go and buy like sopping wet pressure treated 2x4s that are stacked up and probably moldy at the box store, they tend to be super wet and super heavy, and there's two problems with that. Is then the trusses get so heavy, they're really, I mean, they can get really heavy, trust me, and then it's hard to lift, right? Because we're talking about a small homemade operation here. You're not going to have a crane, so you don't want them to be overly heavy. But also, if it's super wet, then it will tend to shrink, and then it'll open up your joints, and that just makes it weaker, right? Tight joints is going to make a truss stronger. It would still be fine, but for those two reasons, I recommend getting kiln dried lumber, so that it's nice and dry and lightweight. Okay, and then back to this. So you can cut it however the heck you want. But that's where I was going is the bigger your plywood pieces are, not only you're using more of your material, but you're also making your truss heavier. So I guess let me go ahead and cut that. And I don't know that there's a reason to show y'all anymore. I mean, obviously the bottom one just follows the bottom band. Screw it all together. I think I'll just go ahead and cut them and then show you the screwing it together process. I'm using old, it's 1/2-inch plywood. It's just some old stuff we had lying around, a couple sheets of it. It's been used. But what I did do, that's, you know, what you want to do is, if you are using full sheets like I am, or really regardless of what you're using, is try to make your dimensions make sense with your material to maximize what you get out of your material. So for instance, since I'm doing, it's sheet of plywood is 4 feet by 8 feet, I believe that's 96 inches. If you do, 16 inches, there's that red mark on the tape measure, because that's a stud layout, and that works out perfectly with the 96, so you would get whatever that comes to, an even number of pieces. There'd be no waste, is my point. And then on some of the bigger pieces, I did 2 feet, because obviously 2 feet works with 8 feet to get 4. So what I did was, I just ripped the entire sheet of plywood in these increments that worked, and then when I cut the rips to length, I did, like I just said, 2 feet and 16-inch lengths, and I think I had like an 8-inch. Yeah, this is like 8 or 9. All numbers that will work, so that I can get the most pieces out of each. Because I only have 2 old sheets of plywood, so I have all the pieces laying. They're just laying there. So now I've got to get the, everything nicely aligned up, and then just screw it together. These are all the different pieces. And like I said, there's no need to you don't have to make these angle cuts if you don't want to. So I highly recommend, if you are using plywood, to don't sit there and trace each little piece on the sheet. Instead, rip a length of the width that you need. You're going to need a bunch of that same width, right? So just rip the entire length of the sheet and then just cut it to the length. And then if you want to cut this off, that could just as well just be a square piece. So could that, other than the angle on the top, right? So just work with what you have is my point. But you see what I got. So we'll go ahead and start screwing this together. Heavy, but not crazy. Let's see, give y'all the overall. Okay, so here's the finished product. Give y'all the total length, because remember mine was based on the I have to walk back and forth a couple times. Mine was based on the rake length, the 12 foot, or 3 inches short of. So my metal will hang nicely over, but let's see what it actually ended up being. Because for me that doesn't matter. I'm just trying to maximize material. That's my objective. What can I get? What's the most I can get out of this material? So there we go. So 312 pitch, 12 foot material, 12 foot roof pans will work perfect. Hang over 3 inches will prevent the ends from rotting, and you end up with 22 foot 10.5 inches is the total length. So what I was going to say was the easiest way, so now you've built your pattern, right? The easiest way to go ahead and duplicate this would be to just disassemble it. It's really, I've pretty much already labeled it. Everything's got the up arrows, you know, the side it goes on, right or left, you know, maybe just add a little more. But my point is, the easiest way to continue with this, to go ahead and make the other however many you want. You could do as many as you wanted or as few as you wanted, but you wouldn't have to do any of this again. Just simply disassemble this, which is another reason, you know, really cool for using the screws and the plywood versus the little gang plates. Which you could use the gang plates and just don't assemble it, but I'm just showing y'all. But the next step would be to disassemble this and then just duplicate the pieces, right? Use those pieces as patterns, would be the easiest way, and just duplicate them as many times, just depending on how many you're building. Just go with you know, duplicate it that number of times. So that's it. See you later.